I got to tell you that just walking around at the coffee break, I now have 4 new board members it's growing. It was me when this started, so I got 4 new board members. Thank you all for reaching out, and keep doing it if you're interested in the education initiative. Okay. Opera, thank you again for that great coffee break. Coffee cake was fantastic. Our next speaker, what we're going to talk about in this session is the 2015 opportunity. That's what he's calling it. And it feels like this is something that all of us need to know what's happening in 2015. It's what social movements are trying to tell us about history's biggest marketing moment. How's that for a build-up? We're going to hear from Aaron Sherinian. He's the Chief Communications and Marketing Officer at the United Nations Foundation. Aaron has led the foundation's PR efforts, media relations, online presence since 2009, managing a great team. He's helped build some of the most talked about milestones in digital global engagement, including Social Good Summit and Giving for Tuesday. So with that, I want to hand the stage over and thank you for coming from the UN Foundation. Thanks, man.
Hello, everybody. For the intro and for giving me, I think, what's probably the perfect word picture. The cake was great, but I'm going to talk to you for a moment about something that for some of you or in some of your organizations, I think gets put into the frosting category. We're going to keep that cake metaphor because we're definitely in the cake category right now. Because what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes, and I hope you're ready, I hope you're caffeinated, I hope you've done what you needed to do, because we're going to talk about why this year sets you up and your clients up for some things that you may not know about, you probably should have heard about, but after today you will know about, so we're all on notice. Today we're going to talk about why 2015 is an opportunity where social movements are teaching us something big. And we know that in 2015 business plans are ready, your clients have come to you with great plans, so why is a guy from the UN Foundation talking to you about 2015 when we're already partway through the year? It's because something's about to happen. There are things already happening. They're going to impact your September and your December. And so before your clients come to you after the fact, I want you to be one of the, what is in my list, 21 smartest agencies that have already come to the table to realize that everything has changed. You know here, because we're talking about transformation, that everything has changed. I'm going to show you a picture that proves it. Are you ready for it? If 2015 is trying to tell us something very big, we all need a reminder for one moment, we'll take a breath, about just how much everything has changed. So when it comes to, we've heard it already this morning, when it comes to everything related to your business, you know you're working in a new landscape. But social movements are working in the same landscape. They're working in the same totally different territory where nobody knows what's coming because we all grew up with this television, or at least I did. I found the Zenith. Okay, a couple of you smirked, which means a couple of you, do you recognize the Zenith? I loved this thing, right? I remember as a kid looking at it. Oh, the power of the Zenith. 13 things could happen to me on that bottom dial. There were 13 options that could take place for me. I still have no idea what the top dial did. I don't know if anyone ever got there, but the top dial did something also. But it was 13 and maybe the idea of 64 options about something that can happen to me. Do you remember that? That was how I viewed the Zenith. 64 potential options that could happen to me in social movements, in life, in everyone you're talking to, and that are buying or engaging with the brands that you help represent and the stories you help to tell. Everything has changed because this is the TV in my house. And I've got some kids. I've got so many kids. Sometimes it feels like gazillions of them. But when my 5-year-old walked up to this new television, do you know what she did? Show me, because you have some kids. What did she do? You're all doing it. She went like this. So I was waiting for the Zenith, right? This is me waiting for the Zenith to operate on me. And my kid is going up to this one and going like this. And she's saying, ¿Dónde está Dora? ¿Dónde está Dora? She was looking for Dora. She knew Dora was on there somehow. So absolutely everything has changed. Social movements are part of that. It's not really about the new technology, but the new technology is a good metaphor. And I love the Zenith, the flat screen juxtaposition. But it's really about this new idea of engagement. And people in the world today are not waiting for you to put something nifty and neat together with bright lines and very nifty campaign goals for them to see that you're working on a social movement. They're ready to engage. They're not waiting for it to happen to them. They're calling on you early, and 2015 is the year where people will know if your organization is an agency and the brand you represent treat all of those issues of CSR, sustainability, all of those words that tend to be talked about together, they'll know the difference between whether it's the 10th chapter in your annual report, or an afterthought, or something very real and purposeful. This is the year, because things are happening that it's not your day job to know about. It's my day job to know about, but I want to bring it to you as a network of networks, because this is the year when people will be able to distinguish purpose from baloney. So I want you to be part of that, and we'll talk about that right now. And another idea about this is we've seen it, right? We talked about the zenith, we talked about the flat screen. Some of you remember and have seen this picture. You know where we are here, right? Even though you can't see the end of it. This is Via della Conciliazione in Rome, where people were waiting for the ascension of Pope Benedict. I've got some people here who remember that moment. They're watching it. At the 4A's, I think it's a good time to remember for a second the difference between that moment with the ascension of Pope Benedict and the ascension of Pope Francis. You saw this, it was reported about. You work on it, but it's not about the tech. The difference between these two is striking, but it's not about the tech, it's about how people came out in the streets and are their own media outlet. And then if we look one step closer, they're telling people what matters to them, in this case, faith. Maybe because they were there for a historic moment, maybe they're believing Catholics, maybe they're faithful in the faith. But either way, people are doing the same thing with purpose. They're more willing to share, and they're calling on people to say whether or not they care about issues of purpose. Everything has changed. This digital evolution is happening at the same time we're in a philanthro revolution. So all of those words about philanthropy and corporate social responsibility and all those things that nicely fell into the 10th chapter of an annual report, or maybe got people a silver anvil because it was a very nice campaign, baloney. The paradigm has changed. People are part of this philanthro revolution because it involves citizen activation and a very real global manifestation of how people expect a brand to talk about the world. You're experts. You know how to do this. Let's share some intel so that you can go back and have some good stories about Austin, some good memories, some new insights. But I'm talking to you so that you can put your agency on notice, because you're going to be put on notice from a brand, but more importantly, from people. The philanthro revolution has everything to do with reputation and advocacy and public relations and brands and communications. Things that used to be Madison Avenue topics are all part of the philanthro revolution. We're living it. And these social movements that I'll discuss today are a couple of examples, and I'll pull out some movements and some phrases that show us that 2015 can be the communications opportunity of a generation. Because the kids that were born today are operating on brands in a very different way than before. This is the United Nations, an organization I'm proud to partner with. The foundation partners with them to connect people, ideas, and resources with what the UN is doing. But this used to be the perception of the UN, a building in which diplomats could enter. Everything has changed because this is what's happening around UN processes today. It didn't before. Young people, together with brands and partners, and in this case at the 92nd Street Y, together with thousands of bloggers with Mashable, are coming together with very big brands and names that include cell phone operators, that include giants in the media business, are coming together in advance of summit meetings. And they're asking the question, which brands are on board? So global summits in 2015 are not meetings, they're now movements. They represent movements, and they represent movements that you should be aware of. The two big ones that I want to make sure are on your screen today, because customers care, people care, is the UN General Assembly that will take place in September. And then a major convening on, get ready for it, climate in Paris in December. So that's probably not in your business plan. It's probably not in any of your quarterly forecasts. It should be today. New York in September, Paris in, wait a minute, New York in September, Paris in, it kind of sounds like a Nat King Cole thing, but it's really about a philanthro revolution thing. So when the UN comes together to decide a new global to-do list, and when it talks about climate, there will be a list of those who engaged, those brands that talked about it, and those brands that were silent. You do not want to be on the silent list this year. You have a story, help extrapolate it, help take it through. Because on Main Street, the conversation has already begun. It wasn't your job to know about it, it was ours. And let me tell you how it manifests itself on Main Street. Because a couple of movements have made their way via you. They've maybe skipped over some of you and they've gone right to Main Street. Here's a couple that I want to talk about. I'm not in charge of some of these, but they've got my attention. They should definitely have yours. They talk about each of them, an important story, and each of them has a phrase that matches them. So are you ready? We're going to zip through these movements and the phrase that they bring up, and the phrase that I hope really bothers you on the way back home, and it starts a conversation when you're with your teams. Global Citizen. Many of you know about Global Citizen because they did something huge in Central Park around the last summit meeting. If you thought that was big, and if you thought Jay-Z together with Central Park at a concert was big, Global Citizen is now part of Main Street. Global Citizen is asking people the stuff they care about. It's already in their feeds. It's most importantly already in their minds because people are saying that when it comes to the world, we want new goals. We don't want aspirations. We don't want just things that are nice and out there. I want something I can measure. And that process has started. This year, the world will come together to decide a new to-do list of 17 things. The world. Do your partners and your clients know that there's a new list of CSR, if you want to call them that? That's not the word. There's a new list of sustainability, if you want to use that word, that's not the word. There's a new list of global goals out there. Global goals that will change the world. They include the stuff you probably could think about, things that are in that better world category that we heard some big brands doing big stuff on. We're talking about hunger, education. We're talking about rights for girls and women. We're talking about access to water. We're talking about the things that the world wants. And we don't just think the world wants these, because for the first time in history, the UN did something remarkable. They went out and polled the world. Millions of people in markets everywhere have been polled for years. And there's data. And the data is telling us what people want to focus on in these new global goals. They're the issues that you can guess are on people's minds, and they're the issues that every brand needs to have a story about. Education, health, jobs, a responsive government, and people who are making sure that the world can be fed. Another movement to watch is Action 2015. Action 2015 is a group of, at this point, nearly 2,000 NGO networks around the world. I'm going to repeat that because it's hard to talk about 2 NGO networks working together, let alone 2,000. So for the first time in history, we have what we believe is the largest group of NGO networks coming together saying this is the year we're going to make a list of people who were engaged and people who were not. You may not have heard about Action 2015, you should, because when 2,000 NGO networks come together, every brand in this room, every brand represented by the agencies in this room needs to know about it. Their message is, we know that you can hear us. They're listening to how people react to these new goals. They're the watchdogs in some cases, but they could be your biggest fans. They're the watchdogs of your brands, but they have the potential of being the biggest advocate of your brands. DC knows this, because we know that that's the way to move policy. We saw what happened in Tahrir Square when some of these groups come together, when people with voices come together, and we saw what happened in Hong Kong when groups like this come together. You know that it's less about disruption as it is about this eruption of excitement around movements and issues and causes when they know there's goals associated with them. Real work, not fluff, indicators, not frosting, cake. Real targets that the world is working on. That should make your work a little bit easier, but also challenging, because the world got very, very, as we saw in Hong Kong, the world got very, very big recently. Does anyone remember where they were on Halloween a couple of years ago? A couple of years ago, Halloween, I was with my kids, giving out candy, just kind of waiting to see when the next group would come so I could have the Twix that I really like, and we were doing our thing. But something happened on Halloween a couple of years ago. Baby 7 billion was born. Do you remember that? It got some hits in the news. Nat Geo did some great things on it. Baby 7 billion was born while we were all doing Halloween here in the States. That meant the world got bigger than it has ever been in terms of population. But what didn't hit the news, so the world's bigger than it's ever been. That's why this stuff matters. What didn't hit the news was this. The world got bigger than it's ever been. The world has never been this big. The world has never been this young. There has never been this proportion of people under 25 globally. These are the people that are expecting something different from your brands this year. These are the people that are looking at these summits not as something cute, but as something fundamental to the way that everyone will live their life. So in a 7 billion year, it takes me this long just to walk past the zeros in a 7 billion moment for our world. The stuff that I'm talking about right now is not an afterthought. It's absolutely the principal thought on the minds of that 43%. You'll talk about millennials later on today and how they like to click and how they like to interact and how they like to do storytelling. I want you to be thinking about what matters to them and how they're driven by cause, because we saw in the Giving Tuesday movement a very new story. Quick straw poll, any of you aware of Giving Tuesday? Did it hit anybody's inbox? I'm so happy. Just wait. Because the young people in America and around the world and the countries around the world sent the message that I can give as good as I get. The people of Giving Tuesday, and if my friend Henry Timms were here from the 92nd Street Y, he would say Giving Tuesday showed people they weren't looking for rules around cause engagement, they were looking for tools. That these are people who know that we're the face of philanthropy. Not the fat cat with the cigar from turn of the century who gave $1 billion check. They're still important. And by the way, I would like your phone number if you're there. But the new face of philanthropy is the movement that brought together a revolution like Giving Tuesday, and the agencies, many of whom are here in this audience, that helped power that because they were looking around the corner with what's happening in cause and engagement. So if they're the new face of philanthropy, so is the unselfie. The unselfie, a tactic, but we see what happens when it can come together with people saying, I want to be public about my cause. And by the way, I don't need a brand's permission to do it. I'm going to make the connection with those brands that matter to me. So the selfie is talked about, the selfie is much tweeted about, but it's less about what's trending and whose selfie is trending. It's more about the trend of the unselfie and what it says. The world's never been bigger, it's never been younger, it's never cared more about cause. The world is also telling us that they love your stories, they love the storytelling and the genius of the people that we've seen here today and we'll talk about. But people are more interested in their story. They're more interested in telling their cause story. So 4A's community, if we're going to be transformative, if we're going to be collaborative, what we've learned in the social movement space is that it's time to finally be very comfortable with losing a lot more control when it comes to storytelling about your brand and the cause. If you try to control the story, it's not going to work. Let me tell you my own story about what happened when we partnered with a guy who wears this hat. Does this hat look familiar to any of you here? I don't think it belongs to any of you here. This is the hat of a very famous guy who happened to make a very famous song. It's Pharrell Williams' hat. Here's the story. The International Day of Happiness takes place. We at the UN Foundation partner with it. But we're doing this in an era when people are dying of hunger. And some brands were skittish, to be honest, to talk with us in an era where there's very real issues of education and human rights, poverty. How do you talk about the International Day of Happiness? And a typhoon took place. A typhoon took place in the Philippines. Do you remember Typhoon Haiyan? The devastation that we saw in the news. So how do you talk about what makes people happy and what they want and they aspire to in that era? We get a call. Aaron, there's about to be a press conference in the Philippines. They're about to release, where other people are uploading happy videos, the Philippines, in the area where this took place, in Tacloban, is about to release a video on the International Day of Happiness. You've got a problem. Here's what happens when the word happy is told in the stories of people who are living this moment. Let's watch a few minutes. Put yourself in my shoes. You're the crisis comms person who does this for a living. Here's what happens.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say.
20 seconds in the video, we have no idea what to expect. We've seen the CNN footage that they spliced, and we're watching with bated breath as social media is coming through and people are dancing on the rubble of their schools. Is it a ploy? What's going to happen? And then the people of the Philippines start telling us why they put together this video. And the message is, we'll dance on the rubble if it gets the word out. We'll dance here to show you that we're here. And we will tell you our story. It's not just limited to CNN. Who's with us and who's saying thank you. Love to watch all of it, but we're going to cut the video there if we can for a moment. Because what it teaches us, and I love the people that had the courage to tell us that story, what it teaches us is that storytelling is at a new era. So the challenge for each of us, as you, the storytellers, you the people that work on these big issues, that care about broad impact, think about how 2015 is helping create better ambassadors for your brands, bigger partnerships with more connection, and how in an era of 2015, the world will set the stage, set a new to-do list for what happens in 2030. Wasn't your day job to know that, it was mine. You're a network of networks. 21 agencies have already come to the table to say, we don't know what to do with this yet, but we'd like to know. I hope that you'll go back and you'll ask yourself that question about how the big challenges of poverty, education, rights, how they relate to your brand, because the opportunity is bigger than that challenge. There's responsibility, there's opportunity. We know that 2015 is the communications opportunity of a generation, and we know that a community like this can make sure that it all comes together for a better world. Thank you for being part of that story.